The story of Muammar Gaddafi begins in the hot desert of Libya, where the wind carries sand like tiny stars. He was born in a small Bedouin tent, not in a palace, not with soldiers around him, but in a quiet place where his people lived simply. As a child, he walked miles to school, holding his books the way other kids held toys. He watched his country suffer under a king who lived in wealth while many people stayed poor. Gaddafi felt this pain. He wanted freedom for Libya. He wanted dignity for Africans. Even as a boy, he dreamed like a man carrying the weight of a continent. At night, he would stare at the sky and whisper to himself, "There must be a better way." His mother told him, "A man becomes strong not by birth, but by courage." Those words stayed with him. As he grew, he learned about leaders like Nasser of Egypt, who fought for their people. Gaddafi believed Libya deserved the same pride. The young soldier studied, trained, and quietly built a vision inside his heart, one of unity, justice, and African strength. But he knew dreams alone could not change a nation. Something bigger was coming. Something bold. And it would shake the world. Gaddafi entered the military as a teen young man with bright eyes and a quiet fire in his chest. Libya at that time was rich in oil, but most of the money left the country. Foreign powers took control. Ordinary Libyans lived like shadows in their own land. Gaddafi watched this with growing anger. He gathered a small group of young soldiers who felt the same pain. They met in secret, whispering in low voices, planning a peaceful change. They were not hungry for power, they were hungry for fairness. Libya must stand on its own feet, Gaddafi told them. No more puppets. On September 1, 1969, before the sun rose, the young officers made their move. It was quiet. No violence. No chaos. When the people woke up, the old king was gone, and Libya was suddenly in the hands of its own sons. At only 27 years old, Gaddafi stood before his nation. He said, "This country belongs to you." His voice shook, not from fear, but from the size of the moment. The world looked at this young man and wondered, who is he? What does he want? But Libyans felt hope waking inside them. A new path had begun. And the boy from the desert was now leading a nation. After taking power, Gaddafi surprised the world. Instead of building a palace, he stayed in a simple tent. Instead of keeping oil wealth for himself, he used it to rebuild Libya. Roads stretched across desert lands. Schools opened where there had been none. Hospitals grew in villages where people once walked hours for basic care. Libya began to change fast. Women went to school. Families got free healthcare. Poor citizens received homes. The country, once ignored by the world, now stood tall with new pride. Gaddafi wanted Libya to be strong, but he also wanted Africa to rise. He believed the continent had been broken by years of colonial rule. He said, "Africa must stand together. If we are divided, the world will control us. If we unite, we will be powerful." Some leaders listened. Others laughed. But Gaddafi did not stop dreaming. He pushed for the African Union. He talked about one African army, one African passport, and an African currency backed by gold so no foreign nation could control Africa's future. Across the continent, many people saw him as a leader who dared to dream big. But with every dream he chased, powerful nations far away began to watch him more closely, and not with friendly eyes. Gaddafi's dream grew louder, and so did the world's attention. He used Libya's oil wealth to support African nations that were struggling. He paid debts for poorer countries, built roads in others, and funded African development when no one else would. In many places, people called him the King of Kings of Africa. But in the West, leaders whispered something different. They called him unpredictable, dangerous, too bold. Gaddafi wanted Africa to have its own bank, its own gold-backed currency, and its own strength separate from Europe and America. This idea worried powerful countries that had enjoyed control for many years. Still, Gaddafi pushed forward. He built a great man-made river, the largest irrigation project in the world, bringing water across the desert. Scientists said it was impossible. He made it possible. But while Libyans saw progress, foreign governments saw a man they could not control. And history shows powerful nations fear leaders who cannot be controlled. Tensions grew quietly, like smoke before a fire. Gaddafi felt the pressure. He knew storms were forming around Libya. But he believed he was fighting for Africa's future, and he refused to step back. Then came 2011, the year everything changed. Protests spread across the Arab world, and foreign powers saw a chance to reshape Libya. At first, Gaddafi believed Libya could settle its problems peacefully. But media stories, political pressure, and international voices grew louder. Soon, NATO forces moved in. Planes filled the sky. Libya, once calm and proud, became a battlefield overnight. Explosions shook cities. Families ran for safety. Chaos replaced the life Libyans had built for decades. Gaddafi refused to leave the country. "I will die in Libya," he said. "This is my land." He moved from city to city, trying to protect his people while foreign bombs fell. The world watched as one of Africa's strongest nations collapsed piece by piece. In October 2011, Gaddafi was captured and killed by rebel forces as NATO jets circled above. His final moments spread across screens everywhere. Some celebrated. Others cried. But many Africans felt something deeper, the loss of a leader who dreamed of a united continent. Libya fell into years of war. The man who once lifted the nation died far from the brave young soldier he once was. Yet even in death, Gaddafi left a question that still echoes today: what happens when a leader dreams too big for the world to allow? After Gaddafi's death, Libya changed in ways no one expected. The country broke into many groups, each fighting for control. Cities that once felt safe became places of fear. Schools closed. Hospitals struggled. Families left their homes and lived as refugees. The Libya Gaddafi once held together began to fall apart, piece by piece. But even in this darkness, many people remembered the years before the war. They remembered free education, clean water, new roads, and the strength of a country that once stood proudly. Some Libyans whispered, "We did not know what we had until it was gone." Across Africa, people argued about Gaddafi. Some said he made mistakes, that he ruled too firmly. Others said the world pushed Libya into chaos because Gaddafi's dreams were too big. But all agreed on one thing: his presence shaped the continent in a way few leaders ever had. Nations that once received his support now struggled alone. Many African leaders asked themselves, who will stand for Africa now? Who will invest in our future without asking for something in return? The world had changed. And the dream of a united Africa suddenly felt far away, like a light seen but never reached. Yet Gaddafi's story did not end in silence. People continued to study his life, to argue about his choices, and to wonder what Africa might have become if he had lived a little longer. The years after Gaddafi's fall revealed something powerful. Many young Africans began to look deeper into his life. They found old videos, speeches, and interviews where he spoke firmly about freedom, justice, and African pride. They heard him say, "If Africa unites, no one can stop us." These words touched a new generation. Teenagers who never saw him alive began sharing his speeches online. University students debated his ideas. They wondered why one leader used his country's wealth to support others instead of keeping it all. But they also learned about his mistakes, times when he ruled too strictly, times when people were punished for speaking against him. The documentary of his life was not perfect. It carried both light and shadow. Still, the question remained, why did the world fear an African currency backed by gold? Why did powerful nations act so fast when Libya began to grow stronger on its own? People started to connect the dots. They saw that Libya had one of the highest living standards in Africa before the war. They saw that the country had no foreign debt and owned its resources. And slowly, Gaddafi's story became more than history. It became a mirror, showing how easily a nation can rise, and how quickly it can fall when the world turns against it. Gaddafi's dream for Africa was more than speeches. He planned real things, things that were already taking shape before the war stopped them. Engineers worked on a satellite project so African nations wouldn't pay Europe millions for communication. Banks began early talks for an African monetary fund. Leaders discussed one African passport to increase trade and movement across the continent. These were not fairy tales. They were steps that could make Africa stronger and independent. But strong nations do not rise without shaking the balance of power. While some African leaders supported Gaddafi, others stayed silent, afraid of upsetting countries that gave them aid. The pressure from the outside world grew heavy. Rumors spread. Media stories painted him as a villain. And in global politics, once a leader is labeled a threat, the countdown begins. Gaddafi knew this. He sensed the danger long before 2011. But he kept moving because he believed Africa was worth fighting for. When he spoke at international meetings, he pointed at world powers and said, "Africa is not your playground." Some laughed. Some rolled their eyes. But others looked nervous. The world watched an African leader trying to rewrite old rules. And history showed what often happens to leaders who try to change too much. In Libya, people felt the pressure too. The country became the center of global attention. Foreign news showed only one side of the story. Many Libyans felt unheard. They saw changes happening too quickly, decisions made from faraway capitals, and rumors spreading faster than truth. Some citizens protested Gaddafi's rule, asking for political freedom. Others stood by him, remembering how much Libya had improved under his leadership. The nation split, not because people hated their country, but because confusion filled the air. Then came the NATO intervention. Many Libyans were shocked. They thought foreign armies would protect civilians, but soon they saw bombs falling on schools, roads, and homes. They asked, "Is this help? Or something else?" Gaddafi tried to speak to the world, but his voice was drowned out by larger powers. His final speeches were emotional. "I am fighting against foreign control," he said. "I am fighting for Libya." But the forces against him were too strong. The nation he built for more than 40 years had become a battleground for interests far bigger than itself. And soon, the story of his downfall would echo across Africa as a warning that a country can lose everything in the blink of an eye. Today, years after Gaddafi's death, Libya still struggles to find peace. The land that once had free education, stable fuel prices, and one of the strongest currencies in Africa now battles division and uncertainty. Many Libyans look back with mixed emotions, some remembering his strict rule, others remembering the stability they once enjoyed. Across Africa, people still talk about him. Some call him a hero. Some call him a flawed leader. But no one denies that he dared to dream bigger than most. He wanted Africa to stand as one strong family, free from foreign control. His story teaches many lessons. A nation must protect its unity. A continent must control its resources. And leaders who dream big must prepare for big enemies. Though Gaddafi is gone, his words remain. They rise in classrooms, in history books, in conversations among young Africans who now understand how powerful unity can be. His life was fire, bright, shocking, unstoppable. His death was a storm, painful and sudden. But his dream, the dream of a strong and united Africa, still moves from heart to heart. And maybe one day, a new leader will rise from the desert, just as he did, and finish the story he started.